Whoops. That was the gracious sound of my iPad hitting the floor. Only from the height of my mattress to the floor. It's not as bad as it sounded. Last year I made a video where I googled Norway and it was very funny. I mean, I thought so. So today I'm gonna Google London. I live in London, by the way. That's why it's relevant. So I'm gonna see if I can find any misconceptions or people correctly assuming stuff. Whenever I go incognito, it feels so sketchy, but then I read a tweet that said, let's be honest, our calculator history would be way more embarrassing than our browsing history, and that's very true. Is living in London worth it? I would say yes, because my experience has been good. It's been very challenging. I'm not even gonna try and pretend that this city is easy to live in, but for me it has been worth it because I've met so many great people that have changed my life, and I would never want to take that back. Because of all the stuff I've learned and all the people I've met and just how I've developed as a person, I can't imagine not having lived here, so for me definitely worth it. Is living in London expensive? Yes. Absolutely. Is living in London good? Of course, this can depend on so many different things. There's so many different areas, but it also of course depends on where you're from, because it could be better than where you're from, it could be worse than where you're from, but definitely it is a good place if you're from a country where you can't be yourself and you don't really have a lot of freedom and you can't do what you want, because in London, like, you can be whatever you want to be. It's such a diverse place, so I think it's a good place to like get to know yourself and figure out who you really are. Is living in London depressing? After watching a few like why I left LA videos, I guess a lot of things can apply to big cities. Like, if you just don't enjoy it while it lasts, enjoy it while it's happening, if you don't really, you know, try and you don't focus on what's important to you, time just flies so fast. It's one of those things, like, you need to make the most of it yourself. The city's not gonna do anything for you automatically, like, you need to make stuff happen yourself. But the absolute majority of the people that I've met or my friends love living in London. Is living in London safe? Yes and no. It's just a typical big city where you have to be careful. There are areas where I wouldn't walk by myself even in daytime because I wouldn't feel very safe. I'm also a very approachable person, so it's very easy for people to catcall me or harass me or whatever. I'm never gonna say that it's the victim's fault for whatever happens, but you really have to be careful with situations you put yourself in, and please don't take that as victim blaming, because I would never do that. But you really need to be awake and alert in all of that. Like, you need to think about what you're doing. You can't trust people, basically. I remember before I moved here as a student, they gave us this online lecture or whatever on living in London before we came here, and one of the things they focused on was never believe that people are as trustworthy as you are. And that's very true. You cannot just trust strangers. People will try and scam you. People will try and steal from you. In a big city, there's gonna be a lot of bad people. You just have to be careful. I am taking way too long to get through these. Is living in London bad for your health? I don't think so. It's obviously like more polluted than like the countryside or whatever, and whatever lifestyle you have might affect it because people like drink a lot or whatever, but in itself I wouldn't really say it's bad for your health. Is living in London fun? Yes! It's super fun! Super fun! Why is London so expensive? Because so many people want to live here, so the prices can be high because people come here. Why is London so hot? I am wondering that same question every single day. Why is London full of foreigners? Because people love London, okay? Tourists love London, people come here to visit all the time. If you walk through central London, you're gonna hear like 100 different languages. London is really popular, and pre-Brexit it was also quite easy to move here, and as I said, for a lot of people, London provides a better quality of life than what they have in their own country. London is not part of the UK. I mean, we did see when the Brexit vote happened that London is very divided from like a lot of other parts of the UK. What is London minimum wage? I'm actually curious about that. $8.36? Excuse me? Can you live in London on 20k? Yes, you can. Absolutely. Can you swim in London? Just not in the Thames. Not in the Thames, whatever you do. Does London Zoo have elephants? I don't know, I haven't been there. I don't like to go to places that have animals. Does London have hard water? Yes, and I don't know if my scalp will ever be the same. Not sexy to talk about, but super annoying. How does London Underground charge? A lot. Just be aware of what zones you're traveling in, because the more zones, the more expensive it's going to be. If it's not during rush hour, I would recommend taking a bus instead, but that's just because I'm stingy see. Living in London, estate agents. At this point, estate agents is like a running joke between me and my friends because like they're kind of the specific type of people who just think that they have all the power in the world and they're super important. I'm sure there's great estate agents out there, but the majority of the people that I've met have just been really annoying and really difficult, so ugh. Living in London as a student. I am so happy with my decision to come here and study. It definitely made my student experience like so much more fun than it probably would have been in Norway. The first year here, my friends and I would go celebrity hunting all the time, not like pestering them. It was always at like premieres and stuff. I met so many cool celebrities and I loved posting pictures on Facebook to make people jealous. And these were big celebrities, okay? Like Antonio Banderas, Daniel Radcliffe. I was at the Hobbit premiere, so I saw the whole cast. Sir Ian McKellen was this far away from me. Like, London has something happening all the time, but just make sure that you get stuff done. Don't just think like, oh, I have all the time in the world. No, get to doing. Time is gonna fly fast. Is moving to London a good idea? Do people actually Google this? Obviously, everything comes down to your situation and what's a good idea for you. But if it doesn't make sense, if it's too hard, if you have no money, like, London isn't just gonna fix your problems, you know? Like, living here is hard, so you kind of need to somewhat have your shit together. But if you're looking for a fresh start, I think living in London is a great option because, as I said, like, you can just be whoever you want to be. If you were that shy kid in class, you don't have to be that person anymore when you come here. I just wanted to do a London smells like because I thought it was gonna say pee, but instead we got London smells like weed, and absolutely it does. I didn't know what weed smelled like until I moved here. I remember I was in town with one of my friends and I was like, what is this smell? And I was like really loud. I was like, it smells so weird. And one of my friends was like, shh, like it's quiet, like stop it. I literally had no idea. I remember that I thought it smelled like being on a farm or something, which that's not how I would describe the smell now, but yeah, I was so confused. It didn't smell like anything I'd ever smelled before, so I was just so confused. And it's crazy now to think that I didn't know what it smelled like, because now I literally smell it every single time I leave my house. Does London have a lot of rats? I mean, of course in a big city you're gonna see rats, but it's not overwhelming. It's more like we have a lot of foxes. I would say that's the more common scavenger, like you see foxes everywhere. I remember like my cousin was visiting and we were like walking home late at night and he saw a fox standing in a yard and he was just like, is that a fox? Because in Norway you would never see foxes down by houses. That's so strange, but these foxes are like not scared of people. They're everywhere. Another thing I hadn't experienced before is the sound the foxes make. I literally thought someone was being killed outside my house the first time I heard it, but no, it's just foxes. Does London have a lot of fog? I wouldn't say a lot, but it does happen and it's very like thick. Sometimes you open the curtains in the morning and it's like, what? Which is kind of cool, but it doesn't happen a lot. Like I would say only a few days a year you would see that kind of fog. Does London have a lot of homeless? Yes, obviously London is known for having a lot of homeless people. So if you're not used to seeing a lot of homeless people, it might be a bit of a shock to see that many people in unfortunate situations. And you might feel like you want to help everyone, but there's just a lot of people. Within the first months that I lived here, I had a big fail where I went with a friend and we bought a meal for a homeless person. They were really shaking. I don't want to assume anything about their situation, but it might have been withdrawals. The person just said like, I can't eat anything. You should have asked me before you bought it because I can't eat, like it makes me ill. But we managed to find someone else to give it to because there's just so many. I would say there's homeless people everywhere in London, but in some areas there's more. And if you go late at night, you'll see a lot of like mattresses being out. And even in high streets, in doorways, you'll see people camping or sleeping or just settled down there. But some places a lot of people come together and they have a lot of stuff and a lot of like mattresses, and a lot of them sleep in the same place. Sometimes you'll see this in like alleyways and sometimes you'll see it under bridges and stuff. And I know that some people might feel very uncomfortable about this, but they just don't want to be bothered, you know? They're not gonna do anything to you. They might ask you for money, but like that's it. I've never had a homeless person be threatening or anything. Usually like they're just trying to get by, so it's not really something to feel uncomfortable about or feel scared about. Okay, does London have a lot of bugs? I haven't had like the worst problems with bugs. I did have silverfish in the first place I lived, which was student halls. A lot of people had silverfish there. Silverfish is definitely like a big problem in London. Like so many people have them. They're so gross. I also know one of my friends moved into a new place and there were cockroaches, which luckily I haven't had to deal with here because they're so disgusting. But no, I wouldn't say that it's a big issue. Spiders, on the other hand, there's a lot of spiders here and they're pretty big. I know that a lot of people have issues with spiders. A lot of people use these nuts to keep them away. I also have the spider spray that I use because I don't want them to come in, because I don't like killing spiders or bugs or anything, so I have to throw them out and it's just scary for me, so I really try to keep them out. And lastly, does London have a lot of traffic? Yes, it's so annoying. Obviously you have to expect this when you live in a big city, like especially during rush hour. Really from like 7 to like 10, 11 in the morning it's gonna be super busy, and then from like 2, 3 till like 6, 7 it's gonna be crazy again. In big cities, rush hour lasts for like 4 or 5 hours. There's 5 o'clock traffic for the majority of the day. If you need to get past like a big junction or a bridge or like crossing the river, But there's just a lot of people in general. Like if you go to get the tube at this time as well, like it's just gonna be like squeezing in there. There's a lot of people. I remember one of the first like trips around London that I went on with my new friend group, and the tube pulled up and it was packed, and I was like, oh, should we wait for the next one? And my friend Kadim was just like, the next one's not gonna be better? Like me thinking the next one would be empty. Like, yeah, sure. It's a lot, but you grow accustomed to just having a lot of people around you all the time. And you also get used to having to leave earlier all the time because travel is an issue. I thought the questions or results or whatever that I would get would be more entertaining, but I hope this video is still a little bit fun or maybe educational or anything if you're thinking about living in London. Thank you so much for watching, and I shall see you next Friday with a new video. Keep it the good vibes. Bye. Now I can finally open the windows again.